All right. Hello. I'm back here. It's G, and I wanted to talk about um I wanted to maybe make this maybe a couple months I do a video about this. Every couple months if possible. We'll see how time allows me. But I'm someone who's extremely interested in philosophy, and this did not come about until I wasn't always interested, but now that I've really been digging deep into philosophy for the last 3, 4 years, on and off, I've come to a conclusion about certain things. And while I've always been somewhat of a pessimist, I've just become an actual pessimist. I would describe myself as probably a pessimist. And probably one of the hardest parts of being a pessimist is that I'm a closeted pessimist, right? I may come off pessimistic already, but as a philosophical aspect to myself, yes, I am philosophically a pessimist, a real pessimist, right? I see if I can make this real clear. If anyone here knows who Schopenhauer is, I've read his essays, as you can see here on this site here, right? I have his essays. I've been rereading it, of course, but I have his essays on pessimism. That tells you where I'm at. I mean, he is described as a pessimist, a philosophical pessimist, right? I would like to deny my will, right? Which in essence is to deny myself the will to live, right? And I'll explain that in a little bit. But I want to first say, I was, I've been using this site, Project Gutenberg, before could sometimes find it at a library maybe, and I could read it, or, I had teachers who give me excerpts from different stuff for me to read. Really, a lot of my stuff was excerpted, or I just go online and read, for example, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is a very good site in my opinion. It's a really good actual encyclopedia of just great knowledge and great amounts of philosophical stuff that you can look at. Has great case studies, all sorts of stuff on there. I think that's great. But this is something I did not know until maybe about today, actually. When I was really thinking about it, I really wanted to really see before. I've just finished reading I've started reading the essays. I'm sorry, not I haven't finished. I'm starting to read the essays on the full essay, because I've actually read a lot of excerpts from the essays of Arthur Schopenhauer Studies in Pessimism. I've actually read quite a few excerpts from it. I've never read the full thing. Now I'm trying to read it. Um, and I thought this would be something as a start towards something. The life of a pessimist. I am someone who is a straight up just says there's no meaning in life. There is real no meaning in life. You should deny your will, similar to what Schopenhauer has said. I think you should deny your will to live. But that does not mean, and we'll get to that later. I'm sorry. But I want to get back. But Project Gutenberg, if you're an American, you know, because we have copyright laws in America, where I believe everything technically after a certain amount of time, literary works, movies, music is no longer copyrightable. If I'm correct, that's like 70 something years or something like that. I'm not sure. But if you see here, Project Gutenberg is a library, blah, 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 blah. And right here, it's freely used in the United States. It's no cost, right? It's all this. This is a great site. I'm just reading it to make sure. It's a great site, and I think if you want to privately read it, good, go for it. Since I'm going to be making a video off of it, I'm probably going to try to cite this site if possible, right? So I have to figure this out later, right? I'm sorry, I'm being a little silent here. Uh, but this is a great site. It has literally a lot of philosophical books on here. It has Arthur Schopenhauer's studies in pessimism. I'm sorry, essays in pessimism. Fuck me. I'm sorry, studies in pessimism. It's called the essays in pessimism. I always get that mixed up. There's also, of course, Kant's very famous book, The Critique of Pure Reason, as well as I believe his other one, which laid out his moral philosophy as the groundwork for the metaphysics of morals. I have this on my phone. This is a book I really need to read because I'm very interested in that. And you could probably many other stuff. You could probably find Nietzsche's work if you're really interested. You could probably find some Seneca's work if you're interested in Stoicism, all sorts of stuff. But as someone who's been really thinking about my life, how my life is and the overall meaning of it, I've come to the conclusion that overall life is quite literally meaningless. The earth is set to burn up in 4 billion years. You can't stop that. We as humans have only been here for 10,000 years. And yet we are leading, possibly, we're not going to last for more than another couple million at most, right? Species go extinct all the time. And on top of that, I don't find that there is any inherent objective meaning in our lives. Everything is fleeting, everything dies, and you can't do it. And you cannot be with them anymore. If you live for your mother is going to die at some point. Sorry to say this. You live for achievements and to achieve certain things, well, those achievements will be forgotten in years' time. Does anyone here really remember some great soldier who might have been lauded in ancient Rome or ancient Greece? No, no one does. And at some point, everything that we have created, our knowledge, will be meaningless, as humans will go extinct, and or we enough time passes where we forget all of this stuff, either through war, death, famine, etc. Right? We literally are controlled by our desires. Right? Everything that you do is a control by your desire. Right? You have no will, so to speak, as I like to say, as Schopenhauer likes to say, you are controlled by your will, which is this thing that is irrational, doesn't really use reason or rationale to do anything. It's an irrational thing, and it's the most thing that is best, that controls you the most. It is your desires, it's your wants, it's whatever, it's your wishes, it's your wants, it's your desires. It's what makes you pleasurable at the end of the day, right? That's what's really controlling you. I mean, Schopenhauer, I think, made an analogy that, reason and rationale that we so love is like a blind man on the shoulder of, like, a blind, weak, frail man on the shoulder of will, of this beautiful beast known as will that has no rationale and just does whatever the fuck it wants. Right? I tend to agree with him. Actually, I even go even farther than that. I say that that reason and rationale don't even matter or really exist in this case. While we can use reason and rationale to make arguments, what is ultimately us deciding what we're doing? The illusion of reason and rationale suggests that we have free will in this case. I'm, as a someone else, and this is another part of my overall pessimistic outlook, is that we have no free will either. We are, and if I maybe I'll go into my ideals and my thoughts about free will, but for now I'm merely going to make the statement: free will. We are slaves to our desire. And think about anything that you've ever done in your life, anything that you ever wanted to do, everything that you supposedly do, and you say that is down to choice. You've made the choice. So, for example, do I want to go exercise or do I want to sit on the couch and be lazy? Now, you say, I made the choice to go out and exercise. But I want to ask you this question: what is the real reason you're really doing this? Let's think about this. Why is it that you are going to supposedly choose to go exercise? It is a desire to be healthy. Desires. Oh, oh, it's a desire. And there is a desire to be lazy. At the end of the day, whichever desire is stronger is the one that you supposedly choose. And if anyone here knows, following your desires does not seem to be the definition of free will. That seems to be anything is against it. And on top of that, I'll even go even further. Desires in and themselves are not shaped by you. They're shaped by your genetics, which is about 50%. This is just evidence that we found through twin studies, genetic studies, just all sorts of that type of stuff, right? Especially twin studies. Those are the big ones that really allowed us to think that 50% of our personality and our decision personality, which is where our decisions come from genetics. The other 50% is environmental factors. You have no control over that. Your brain is deterministic in of itself. If everyone here knows this, you already make an unconscious decision before you are even conscious of it. They've done actual experiments where they can basically put electrical signals in your brain, cause you to look at something where you may turn your head to look at something in the wall. When asked the reason, and this is where supposedly you say you made the choice, they say, "Oh, I made the choice to turn my head because I wanted to look at something at the wall." Yet every single time they did this to every single person that they were actually stimulating their brain, it turns out it was because of the stimulation in the brain that caused them to do that, and they just gave a reason as to why they chose to do it. So again, hard determinism. Everything is deterministic in of itself. You're not making a decision. So that goes into my inevitability factor, which is your death, and there's nothing after it. The idea that I am trying to struggle with is this idea of the denial to live. The denial of the will, which is what Schopenhauer talks about. Schopenhauer, he had this idea which I think I've kind of talked about a little bit, and I don't want to misquote him. Um, this is from again from the Project Gutenberg. Oops, Project Gutenberg, very good site if you want to read it. I'm not sponsored, not sponsored in any way. I think it's just a great site. So I'm sorry, I should say that right now. I am not sponsored by Project Gutenberg. I'm such a small channel. What the fuck? I've like no one watches this shit. It's just for my pleasure myself to guess pleasure. I shouldn't do that. Just what I want to talk about. But I'm not sponsored in any way. I think this site's actually really good. I've seen some of their stuff. It's pretty good. Um, he talks about the will as this irrational thing, and he says that in of itself, this causes suffering upon people and suffering among ourselves, right? And he has reasons for that. I'm not really going to go into it. I've come to the realization that he is correct. However, I argue that we can only live by our desires. I go further than him. I say we can only live by our desires. So to live an aesthetic life where he views as the best way is in of itself a desire. In of itself is part of that will that he talks about. So I disagree with him on that, but I find it that maybe there is a point to maybe trying to deny a lot of the will, trying to deny as much of the will as possible, to deny the aspect of living, right? And so this is where I have to think about this: is do how much do I agree with him on that? Because he makes a case why you shouldn't commit suicide. If I am very much correct, he does have a part, and this is trigger warning just to make sure I don't want to piss people off here. But he has a section called on suicide. Now he on this section he specifically talks about being against criminalization of suicide, which was actually a thing back in the day. However, I believe, he makes it as a statement that it's a mistake to commit suicide, as it is in of itself surrender to the will, which your goal is to deny the will, right? Because in of itself, why do you commit suicide? It's because you would feel that some sort of pleasure will come after death, right? Your goal is to end this suffering that you're feeling for some sort of apparent world, apparent, and I say apparent because that's what he says in this, apparent future where you will be happy, which even though that's probably not going to be the case. But again, you're surrendering to the will, which has only ever will rot you with suffering because of the desires, because you're always in an eternal struggle to try to satiate any sort of desires that you have, because everyone's only desires and they're only fleeting. So we'll see how that goes, where I feel about this. Right. I've also read other people's works. I've read Camus' Sisyphus, as very famous work. Looked at a little bit of Stoicism. Looked at Nietzsche's Übermensch, the idea of surpassing your human limits to become something more, the perfect man. But I'm not as familiar with that. But I've read quite a lot of excerpts from Schopenhauer, and my overall pessimism is that I'm probably a philosophical pessimism. I don't see the idea of progress as creating better or more good for us. It seems to me that it's led to other problems to occur even more. Suicide wasn't, suicide has become a much more normalized, even bigger problem nowadays. Anxiety's gone up, depression's gone up, mental illnesses have skyrocketed over the roof. Right? We live overall sad lives, even though we have such great progress. So then I'll ask again, why be an optimist? Why not become a pessimist? And so I can't talk about any of this because, saying that, I've contemplated the idea of suicide in a way is my life worth living? And should I not end it? Right? I'll be very frank here. Should I not end it? I cannot lie when I say that I have not thought about that in a philosophical sense. Should I? Is it worth living? And I think I will not do it. Most likely. We'll see. But I think even right now I don't know how to describe it. It takes a lot of reflection to think about this stuff. And I just wanted to write something. Maybe one day I'll come back to this stuff. I'm still there, but maybe I'll have a change of mind. I'm still forming it 3-4 years later, but I've become much more pessimistic. I don't see any meaning in life. I don't see, I act as though there's meaning in my life, but that's of course a facade. No one really knows that I find life meaningless in this way, of such a pessimist in this way, right? This is the secret life of a pessimist, right? I view friendships, let's just say, pessimistically. I don't see a point. End of the day, it is as fleeting as life is, right? Because it's not permanent. It will all end at some point. All this stuff will end. And I'm going to die, be buried in the ground, right? I'm not going to commit suicide. I don't see the point of it. I find it to be illogical to commit suicide. I think Schopenhauer makes a great point on that. If I'm correct, if what I'm reading is correct based on the essay of Pessimist, the study into the studies of pessimism, right? If I'm correct, I think he describes it as a clumsy experiment. I'll say right here, a clumsy experiment to make, for it involves the destruction of the very consciousness which puts the question and awaits the answer, right? In regards to answer to I cannot speak right now. In regards to the question of this question right here, what change will death produce in a man's existence, in his insight into the nature of things? Right? When he basically says you should not, because in of itself it's illogical, because you are actually, in his opinion, allowing your will to decide what you want to do. And in of itself is illogical. And in of itself, you are trying to stop your pleasure, stop the suffering that you have to gain some sort of pleasure with something that has no basis in reality. You're trying to create an apparent reality that allows for pleasure, which suicide doesn't seem to create. It's my grappling of suicide, at least based on what I understand of Schopenhauer. I'm not a philosopher by any means. I just found a lot of I gravitated towards his work, especially of pessimism. And so I think to myself, what should I do? What's my purpose? I'm sorry, I'm rambling on. I think I should, end it here at some point. But I want to say that this is something that really profoundly is something that is always on my mind, is the meaning of life, the other meaninglessness of life, pessimism, and then the denial of the will of the self to live. So I think that'll make you a much happier person, if you want my opinion. I feel much happier now that I'm a fucking pessimist. So take that as a grain of salt. But thank you again. I don't know what this hell this was, but it's just me talking. So Good luck.